Welcome back. You're still tuned into the Power Station. This is Econo Chat. Let's talk business with Mr. Daniel Steinman, and I am hosting Mr. Daniel Steinman on this very important discussion, LSB, that is, for those who just tuned in. Now, we are talking GDP, we are talking inflation, we are talking stagflation. These are words that you hear every day when we talk about the economy. And, when we talk about forecasting, Mr. Daniel Steinman, the question remains, why is it so difficult to do reliable forecasting?
That is a very good question that you've just come up with. And you will find that among the experts, there's no agreement why the moment inflation is higher than your GDP growth, why it becomes difficult to do reliable. That's the watchword, reliable forecasting. You can do all sorts of forecasting that you love. You can put fancy figures in your graphs and draw nice pictures, but it's all about reliable. And let me just quickly say something about reliability in economics.
Okay.
It's not just about the academic side. For interest's sake, did we grow? Did we shrink? What are the prospects? That sort of thing. It is because government policy depends on reliable forecasting. You can't set economic policy. Very simple. You can't determine tax rates if you don't have reliable forecasts. So it becomes very important. It mustn't be fanciful forecasting. It must be stuff that you can basically work on, that you can manage a country on. And this is why I always make the point, reliable forecasting. And now we look at where we are now. And you remember I made a huge hoo-ha about inflation.
Yes.
6.8, 7.3%, scary figures.
Very scary.
And the reason why is because we don't know where it's going. And one of the things is the attempt by the Bank of Namibia to curb inflation by raising interest rates is futile. There's nothing we can do about the inflation because we didn't generate it ourselves. It's what they call exogenous. It is external shocks. The inflation comes from the movement in the price of crude oil and the movements in the price of staple food, which is done by a conflict in Eastern Europe, not in Southern Africa. So one must be very realistic about your ability to contain inflation. If it is because of excess liquidity in your own market, meaning we have too much money, then it's very easy. You just raise interest rates. And so you bleed some liquidity out of the local market. And people are forced to buy slightly less stuff, So you see the inflation then turning. But if the inflation comes from external factors, you have no control over it. The only reason why we are forced to keep increasing the interest rates is to prevent a liquidity drain in Namibia. Because if the interest rates locally are too low in comparison to either South Africa or the United States, it means that the world's liquidity goes there and we lose out. Now this is a bit technical, and I'm not going to get us bogged down in too technical stuff, but it's very important to realize now you sit with this conundrum that you've got nice growth figures and you see inflation is really going haywire. To jump from 4.8 to 6.8 to 7.3 for inflation, those are very, very big jumps. What are you to do in your forecasting to make provision for this effect of inflation? That's a question that everybody is asking. And because of the volatility of inflation, it becomes very difficult. So what you find in economics is that the analysts, they talk about headline inflation and they talk about core inflation. Now, headline inflation is the one that attracts the most attention. So it's the overall inflation. And core inflation is when you strip out food and fuel, because those are the volatile items. And we've seen it this year, with the price of crude and the price of staple food.
Yeah.
So the picture looks slightly different if you look at core inflation, a little bit more encouraging. But this is now where you have to think beyond the academic side. We can't go without fuel. We can't go without food. So it's just an academic exercise to talk about core inflation and to say that it's we don't need to worry so much, it's relatively stable. But it's not, because food and fuel are two things that you need every day.
Basic need.
Yeah, so you can't get around the practicality of looking at what is inflation right now and looking at how it has jumped over the past 4 months. And that makes the forecasting very difficult, because you don't know what inflation is going to do. I can tell you now that we've got a fairly reliable indication that growth for the next 2 quarters will again be above 5%, because what causes the growth is still there, but I can't tell you what inflation is going to do. That is the joker in the pack. And everything between now and April next year depends on inflation.
And on that note, I should say that, maybe our listeners also took note of what you were saying, because there's also that, I think, is it absent-minded, or let me not put a name on it, but the reason why the Bank of Namibia would increase the repo rate. It has been happening for the last couple of months, where we are just asking, why is the bank doing this? Why is the bank doing this? But we need to understand why the bank is doing this. So we've had these conversations before. So in case you've missed out on previous conversations, 43 conversations, you can, of course, go to economist.com.na to listen to us and, learn and be able to have a conversation around
and join us in the talk.
Yes, definitely. But we unfortunately have to say goodbye to you right now. So
can I extend an invitation?
Okay.
If there are listeners with specific questions, they must mail them to you.
Yeah.
Then we can handle them one by one in future discussions or future talks.
Okay, so let me give you my email address. It is elsabe, ELSABE at energy100fm.com. You can email me your questions and I will then send them to Mr. Daniel Steinman and we can talk about these questions, given answers. And on that note, from me, Elsabe Tiringani, I say goodbye to you till next time.